They laughed while dividing my husband's money like I was already gone. I didn't say anything. I just watched. That was their first mistake. The room smelled like fresh coffee and polished wood, the kind of place that was supposed to feel serious, respectful. A place for grief. But no one in that room was grieving. Not really. Daniel sat at the head of the table like he already owned it, leaning back in his chair, one arm draped over the leather like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. Melissa sat next to him, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like this was just another appointment to get through. Rachel was quieter, but not by much. She kept glancing at the folder in front of the lawyer, like it might open itself if she stared hard enough. I stayed in my seat, hands folded, silent. They barely looked at me. That part didn't surprise me. It hadn't surprised me in years. Let's just get to it, Daniel said, tapping the table like he was in a rush. We all know what this is. Richard Lawson, the tax attorney, adjusted his glasses. He didn't smile. Not once. There are procedures, he said calmly. We'll go through everything step by step. Daniel let out a short laugh. Sure. Step by step. But we already know Dad took care of us. Took care of us. I almost smiled at that. Almost. Melissa leaned in, lowering her voice, but not enough. We should talk about listing the house right away, she said. Market's still strong. We don't want to miss it. Rachel nodded. And the investment accounts. We should liquidate some of that early. Spread it out. They were already spending it. Already dividing it. Like it was done. Like nothing could go wrong. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct them. I didn't even look up. I just listened. Let them build it up in their heads. Let them feel secure. Because I knew something they didn't. Richard cleared his throat again, louder this time. Before we proceed, he said, there are some financial considerations that need to be addressed. Daniel waved his hand like he was brushing off a waiter. Yeah. Taxes. We get it. Just tell us what we're working with. He smiled. Confident. Certain. Like the number was already his. I glanced at Richard. Just for a second. He caught it. He knew. But he didn't say anything yet. He couldn't. Not until they heard it the right way. Not until it landed. Melissa leaned back satisfied. This is life-changing, she said. We deserve this. Deserve. That word hung in the air longer than anything else. I stayed quiet. Let them talk. Let them believe it. Because the truth was, they weren't about to get rich. They were about to lose everything. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to stop it. I watched them build their future out loud like it was already real. Numbers started flying across the table, not from the lawyer but from them. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table now, fully locked in. The house alone is worth at least $800,000, he said, glancing at Melissa for confirmation. She nodded quickly. Probably more if we stage it right. The market in this area has been insane. Rachel jumped in, pulling out her phone. And the investment portfolio, Dad mentioned it was diversified. Stocks, retirement accounts, maybe some bonds. That could easily be another $500,000-600,000. They were stacking it. Piece by piece. Building something that did not exist the way they thought it did. I sat still. I did not interrupt. I did not correct a single number. Richard Lawson opened his folder slowly, deliberately, like he was giving them time to hear themselves. But they were too busy. Too confident. We should not wait, Melissa said, her voice sharper now, more excited. If we liquidate fast, we can avoid market swings. Locking gains. Daniel smiled. Exactly. We play this smart, we could clear over $1 million after everything. After everything. I lowered my eyes for a second. That phrase again. They had no idea what everything actually meant. Rachel leaned back, already relaxed, already spending it in her head. I could finally pay off my mortgage. Maybe upgrade. Something closer to the city. Melissa laughed softly. We were thinking the same thing. Bigger place. Better school district. Daniel nodded. And I am done working 80 hours a week. This changes everything. I let that sit. Let it grow. Let it settle into certainty. Because the higher they built it, the harder it would fall. Richard finally spoke again. His voice calm but firmer this time. Before any decisions are made, There are federal and state obligations tied to the estate. Daniel sighed, clearly irritated now. You keep saying that. Just give us the number. He tapped the table again, faster this time. Impatient. Melissa crossed her arms. Yes, we understand there are taxes. But we are not talking about anything that wipes this out. She said it like a fact. Like it could not happen. Rachel nodded. Right. Worst case, what, 20%? I almost looked up. Almost. But I did not. I stayed quiet. Because this was the moment. The edge. Richard paused. Just long enough. He looked at each of them one by one, then briefly at me. They did not notice that part. It is more complicated than a percentage, he said. Daniel shook his head, already dismissing it. Everything is complicated to lawyers. Just simplify it. He smiled again. Confident. Certain. Wrong. I folded my hands tighter in my lap. I could feel it coming now. The shift. The crack in everything they believed. And still, I said nothing. Richard did not rush this time. He closed the folder halfway, like he was deciding how much they deserved to hear all at once. The room shifted just slightly. Not enough for them to notice. But I felt it. That quiet moment before everything changes. This estate, he said slowly, is subject to federal estate tax, state-level obligations, and deferred liabilities that were not previously settled. Daniel leaned back again, but the confidence was thinner now. Okay, he said, dragging the word out. And Melissa uncrossed her arms, leaning forward. Just give us the total. That is all we need. Rachel nodded quickly, her phone now face down on the table. Even she knew this part mattered. Richard looked at them carefully. Then he spoke. Based on current valuations, the total tax exposure is approximately $740,000. Silence. Just for a second. Then Daniel laughed. A short, sharp laugh. That is not possible, he said immediately. You said the estate is worth over $1 million. Richard did not react. Gross value, yes. Melissa shook her head. So we still walk away with something close to $400,000. That is still significant. She sounded relieved. Too fast. Too certain. Rachel picked it up right away. Exactly. That is manageable. We just need to plan it correctly. I kept my eyes down. Let them correct the story themselves. Let them fill in the blanks the way they wanted. Richard did not interrupt them right away. He let it sit. Let them build a second version of reality. Then he spoke again. That figure does not include penalties for early liquidation, capital gains triggered by forced asset sales, or outstanding obligations tied to the business accounts. The room went still again. This time longer. Daniel's smile faded just a little. What obligations? He asked slower now. Careful. Richard opened the folder fully and slid a document across the table. There are deferred tax liabilities from prior years. Your father structured certain holdings in a way that delayed payments. Those delays are now due. Melissa reached for the paper first. Her eyes moved fast. Too fast. How much? She asked. Her voice was tighter now. Richard answered without hesitation. Approximately $320,000. That number landed differently. No one laughed this time. Rachel leaned forward, her voice quieter. So that gets added to the 740? Richard nodded once. Correct. Daniel sat up straight now. Fully alert. That still does not wipe it out, he said quickly. We are still under the total value. He was trying to hold on to it. Trying to keep control. I could hear it. Melissa flipped through the pages faster now, her confidence slipping. What about this? She said, pointing at a line item. Richard followed her finger. That is the capital gains estimate if assets are liquidated within 12 months. She froze. Estimate. Richard nodded. Conservative estimate. Rachel whispered it this time. How much? Richard did not soften it. 260,000. No one spoke. Not right away. The numbers were not adding up anymore. Not the way they had in the beginning. I finally looked up. Just for a moment. Watched it hit them. Watched the shift in their faces. The first real crack. And still, I said nothing. The silence did not break this time. It stretched. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. Daniel leaned forward slowly, both hands flat on the table now like he was trying to hold the numbers in place. That does not make sense, he said, but his voice had changed. Lower. Tighter. Melissa was still staring at the documents, flipping back and forth like the answer might fix itself if she looked long enough. There has to be way around this, she said. Some kind of strategy. People do this all the time. Richard did not move. There are strategies, he said calmly, but they require planning in advance. What you are seeing here is the result of decisions that have already been made. Rachel swallowed hard. So what are we actually left with? She asked. That question hung in the air longer than anything else. No assumptions now. No confidence. Just uncertainty. Richard took a breath before answering. After all taxes, penalties, and liabilities are satisfied, the estate is projected to be in deficit. Daniel blinked. Deficit, he repeated, like he had never heard the word before. Richard nodded once. Yes. Approximately $320,000. Melissa's head snapped up. That is not possible, she said quickly. You just said the estate was worth over $1 million. Richard did not raise his voice. Value and liquidity are not the same. When assets are forced to convert under tax pressure, value decreases. Obligations do not. Rachel leaned back slowly, her face pale now. So you are saying there is nothing, she whispered. Richard looked directly at her. I am saying there is less than nothing. That was the moment. The exact moment everything collapsed. Daniel pushed back from the table slightly, shaking his head. No, this is wrong. We can just sell the house. That covers most of it. He looked at Melissa like he needed her to agree. She did not answer right away. She was still reading. Still calculating. The house has a lien, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard confirmed it. Yes. A secured lien tied to the deferred liabilities. Daniel turned to him sharply. Why was that not cleared? Richard met his eyes. Because your father chose to defer payment. Legally. Chose to defer. I felt that one land differently. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing now in short steps behind his chair. So what, we just walk away? He asked. That is not how this works. Richard's tone stayed even. If the estate cannot cover its obligations, the responsibility transfers to the beneficiaries. Melissa looked up slowly. Transfers, she repeated. Richard nodded. Yes. You inherit both assets and liabilities. Rachel shook her head, almost to herself. We inherited debt, she said quietly. No one corrected her. Because no one could. I sat there still, watching it unfold exactly the way I knew it would. The celebration was gone now. Completely gone. In its place, panic, confusion, regret. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at me for the first time since we sat down. Really looked at me. Mom, he said, his voice uncertain now. Did you know about this? I held his gaze. Calm. Steady. I could have answered right away. I could have explained everything. But I did not. I let the silence answer for me. And that silence said more than anything else ever could. Daniel's question stayed in the air, but I did not answer it. Not yet. He kept looking at me, waiting like I owed him something. Like I had always owed him something. I held his gaze for a second longer, then looked back down at the table. That was all it took. His expression changed. Confusion first. Then frustration. Mom, he said again, sharper this time. Did you know about this? Melissa turned toward me now too. Her voice controlled but tense. If you knew, you should have said something. Rachel did not speak, but she was watching me closely, trying to read something in my face. I stayed still. Calm. Measured. I asked questions, I said finally. My voice was steady. Quiet. You did not want to hear them. Daniel frowned. That is not the same thing. It is, I said. When someone interrupts the answer, they are not really asking the question. That landed harder than I expected. He looked away first. Melissa leaned forward, her tone shifting again, trying to regain control. Okay, then we fix this, she said quickly. We do not panic. We just need a strategy. There has to be a way to reduce the exposure. She turned to Richard. What options do we have? Richard folded his hands on the table. At this stage, options are limited. Limited is not zero, she pushed. What can we do? He answered without hesitation. You would need to cover the immediate tax obligations to prevent additional penalties. Then negotiate the remaining liabilities over time. Rachel's voice was small now. How much immediate? Richard glanced at the documents. Roughly 400,000 within 90 days. That number hit differently than the others. It was not theoretical. It was now. Daniel let out a breath, slow and heavy. We do not have that kind of cash, he said. Melissa shook her head quickly. We can get a loan. Use the house as collateral. Richard looked at her. The house is already encumbered. She blinked. Then we use the investments. Liquidating them increases the tax burden, he replied. Significantly. Rachel leaned forward again, her voice cracking slightly. So what are you saying? That there is nothing we can do. Richard did not soften it. I am saying every option increases your exposure. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. Like the walls had moved in without anyone noticing. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands, then looked at me again. This time there was no confidence left. Just something else. Something closer to desperation. Mom, he said, quieter now. We need help. I did not respond right away. I let that word sit there. Help. The same people who had already spent the money, already divided it, already decided I would be fine. Now they needed help. I leaned back slightly in my chair, took a slow breath. I tried to help, I said. Before any of this started. Melissa shook her head. We are talking about now, she said quickly. What can you do now? I looked at her. Really looked at her. The urgency. The calculation. Still trying to solve it like it was a deal. Like it was just numbers. Nothing, I said. And this time I meant it. The word hung there longer than anything else I had said. Nothing. Not maybe. Not let me think about it. Just nothing. Melissa blinked like she did not hear me correctly. Nothing, she repeated. Her voice was sharper now. Disbelief mixed with something colder. You cannot just say nothing. I did not move. I can, I said calmly. Daniel stared at me like he was trying to understand who I was. Like I had suddenly become someone else. Mom, this is serious, he said. We are talking about real consequences here. I held his gaze. You were talking about real money earlier, I replied. This is the same conversation. Just a different outcome. Rachel looked between us, her hands clasped tightly together now. There has to be something, she said quietly. You always have something. That almost made me smile. Almost. I had spent years being the one who fixed things. Quietly. Without recognition. Without thanks. I handled the bills. The planning. The things no one wanted to think about. And now they were realizing what that actually meant. Melissa leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly, trying to reset. Okay, she said, forcing calm back into her voice. Let us be practical. You knew this was coming. You said you asked questions. That means you prepared. She looked at me directly. So what did you do? There it was. Not concern. Not regret. Strategy. Always strategy. I did not answer right away. I let the question sit between us. Let it build. Because this was the part they had never understood. Preparation does not always mean protection. Sometimes it means distance. Daniel stepped in before I could speak. Mom, if you have resources, now is the time, he said. We can work this out together. Together. That word felt almost unfamiliar coming from him. I tilted my head slightly. Together. I repeated. He nodded quickly. Yes. We are family. I let out a small breath. Not quite a laugh. We were family when you were dividing everything without me, I said. We were family when you decided I would be fine. No one spoke. Not right away. Because they knew it was true. Melissa tried again, her voice softer now. Controlled. Careful. This is different, she said. We did not know. I met her eyes. I did. That landed exactly where it needed to. Rachel looked down immediately. Daniel's jaw tightened. Melissa did not look away, but something in her expression shifted. Less control now. More calculation. So you let this happen? She asked. The question came out slower than she intended. Careful. Testing. I did not hesitate. I did not stop you, I said. That was the truth. Clean. Simple. Final. Daniel stepped back from the table, shaking his head slightly. I cannot believe this, he said under his breath. You just watched us walk into this? I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I watched you ignore every warning, I said. That is not the same thing. The room went quiet again. But this time it was different. Not confusion. Not shock. Something heavier. Something settling in. They were starting to understand. Not just the numbers, but me. And that was the part they were not ready for. Daniel stopped pacing, but he did not sit down. He just stood there, staring at the table like the numbers might rearrange themselves if he waited long enough. Melissa was no longer pretending to stay calm. She flipped through the documents again, faster now, her fingers pressing harder against the paper with each page. Rachel had gone completely quiet, her eyes fixed on one line, reading it over and over like she was hoping she misunderstood it the first time. Richard did not interrupt. He let them reach it on their own. That was the part people always remembered. Not when they were told, but when they finally saw it themselves. Melissa's hand stopped suddenly. She froze on one page, her eyes narrowing. What is this? She asked, her voice low but sharp. She pushed the paper toward Richard. He glanced down, then back at her. That is the compliance clause tied to the estate's deferred tax structure, he said. Daniel stepped closer, leaning over her shoulder. What does that mean? He asked. Not demanding this time. Asking. Richard answered plainly. It means the Internal Revenue Service has already flagged the estate for review. The room shifted again. This time it did not stop. Rachel looked up immediately. Review, she repeated. Like an audit? Richard nodded once. Yes. Melissa shook her head quickly. No, that does not make sense. We have not even filed anything yet. The structure itself triggered it, Richard explained. Certain deferrals combined with asset concentration and timing automatically flag for audit. Daniel stepped back again, running both hands through his hair. So now we are being audited too, he said, his voice rising slightly. Not yet, Richard corrected. But it is highly likely. That word landed harder than the numbers. Likely. Not if. When. Rachel's voice was barely there now. What happens if they audit it? Richard did not soften this either. They will reassess valuations, verify compliance, and potentially adjust the tax burden upward if discrepancies are found. Melissa looked up slowly. Upward, she repeated. Yes. By how much? She asked. Richard held her gaze. There is no fixed limit. That was it. That was the break. The moment everything went from bad to uncontrollable. Daniel let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was nothing behind it. So this could get worse, he said. Not a question. A realization. Richard did not respond. He did not need to. The answer was already there. Rachel pushed her chair back slightly, her hands shaking now. We cannot fix this, she said quietly. We cannot fix any of this. Melissa did not argue this time. She just stared at the table, her mind moving fast, but for the first time without direction. Daniel looked at me again. Slower this time, like he was finally putting everything together. You knew it would go this far, he said. Not accusing, not asking, just stating it. I did not look away. I knew it would not stop where you thought it would, I said. That was enough, because now they understood the full picture. Not just the debt. Not just the taxes, but the risk, the uncertainty, the fact that this was not a problem with an answer. It was a situation that could keep getting worse. And for the first time since we walked into that room, no one was talking about what they were going to gain, only what they were about to lose. No one spoke for a long time. Not because they did not have anything to say, but because nothing they said would change what was already happening. Daniel finally pulled out his chair and sat down slowly, like the weight of it all had just caught up to him. Melissa was still staring at the documents, but she was not reading anymore. Her eyes were moving, but nothing was landing. Rachel had both hands wrapped around the edge of the table, holding on like it was the only stable thing left in the room. Richard closed the folder halfway again. Not finished. Just pausing. Letting it settle. Daniel looked up first. His voice was different now. No edge. No control. Just raw. What happens next? He asked. Richard answered without hesitation. You have 90 days to address the immediate obligations. If that is not met, penalties increase and enforcement actions may begin. Melissa finally looked up. Enforcement, she repeated. Collection measures, Richard said. Liens, asset seizure, structured repayment orders. Rachel shook her head slowly. This is insane, she whispered. We did not do anything wrong. Richard's expression did not change. The structure was legal, he said. The consequences are also legal. That was the part no one wanted to hear. Daniel leaned forward again, elbows on the table, staring directly at Richard now. So you are telling us we have 3 months to come up with $400,000? Or this gets worse? Yes, Richard said simply. Melissa let out a breath that turned into a short, hollow laugh. We cannot even access anything without triggering more taxes, she said. Every move makes it worse. Correct, Richard replied. Rachel closed her eyes for a second. This is a trap, she said quietly. No one corrected her. As now it was clear. Not just a bad situation. A complete trap. Daniel turned to me again, slower this time, like he already knew what he was going to find. You saw this, he said. All of it. I did not answer right away. I let the silence stretch just enough. Then I spoke. I saw enough, I said. Melissa leaned forward sharply. Then why did you not stop it? She asked. There was no softness left in her voice now. No control. Just frustration. Maybe even anger. I met her eyes. Because you would not have listened, I said. You already decided how this was going to end. Daniel shook his head. That does not mean you just let it happen, he said. You could have pushed harder. I held his gaze. Calm. Steady. I did, I said. You called it negativity. That hit him. Hard. He looked away immediately. Rachel spoke next, her voice barely holding together. So that is it? She asked. We just deal with this? Richard answered before I could. You manage it, he said. Or it manages you. The room went quiet again. But this time it was not confusion. It was acceptance. Slow. Heavy. Unavoidable. They were no longer looking for a way out. They were trying to understand how bad it could get. And for the first time since this started, they were not looking at the money anymore. They were looking at the consequences. No one moved right away. The room stayed frozen, like if they held still long enough something might reverse. But nothing did. It never does. Richard closed the folder completely this time. That sound was quiet, but it felt final. Like a door shutting. Daniel looked at the table for a long moment, then slowly stood up again. Not angry this time. Not pacing. Just heavy. So this is it, he said under his breath. No one answered him. Because there was nothing left to say. Melissa gathered the papers in front of her, but her hands were slower now. Careful. Like the numbers might change if she handled them differently. They did not. Rachel pushed her chair back and stood, but she did not walk away. She just stood there, staring at nothing, trying to process a future that looked nothing like the one she had imagined an hour ago. I stayed seated, watching, quiet, the same way I had been from the beginning. Daniel finally looked at me again. Not with frustration this time, not even with anger, just understanding. Slow and uncomfortable. You tried to tell us, he said. I did not respond. I did not need to. He nodded slightly, more to himself than to me. We just did not want to hear it. That was the closest thing to the truth he had said all day. Melissa did not look at me, but her voice came out softer now. We thought we were getting something, she said. We did not think we were stepping into this. I stood up slowly, smoothing my hands over the table for a second before letting them fall to my sides. You were getting something, I said. They all looked at me. Even Rachel. You were getting responsibility, I continued. You just thought it would come with money. That settled in differently. Not like the numbers. Not like the legal terms. This was simpler. Harder to argue with. Daniel let out a long breath. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I picked up my bag from the chair beside me. "I am going to move forward," I said. Melissa finally looked up. "Just like that?" she asked. I met her eyes. "Just like that." Rachel's voice came last, quiet but clear. "And us?" she asked. I paused for a second. "Just long enough." "That depends on you," I said. "What you do next is your responsibility." No one stopped me when I turned toward the door. No one asked another question, because they already knew the answers would not change anything. I walked out of that room the same way I had walked into it. Calm, quiet, but everything behind me was different. The celebration was gone. The plans were gone. All that was left was reality, and for the first time they had to face it without pretending, without assumptions, without me fixing it. As I stepped into the hallway, I could still feel the weight of that room behind me, but it was not mine anymore. It had never really been mine. I had seen it coming. I had understood it, and I had stepped back. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, but because some lessons cannot be explained. They have to be lived, and now they finally were.